Ultimately, your child gets to direct where they're turning, how fast they're going, how they're using, just, you know, and so I think that's how I kind of go about those conversations, which are a lot of fun. And you have to be okay with parents who just are never going to be happy, and they're going to give you that feedback, and you just look at them and say, hey, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Let's agree to disagree. Let me help find a program that's better fitting for your expectations, not what your child wants.
We talked about community connection, talked about this point right now about connecting with parents. You asked about tennis successes. I mean, again, what I love about what we're doing with Game Changer and our team has been doing for a long time is we have taken data that people have worked hard to collect and turned it into a undata-looking experience, right? You basically get to watch your kid like you watch sports on television. And on a daily basis, you know, we get messages from grandparents who don't live with their grandkids, and they kind of have that connection. That went to a fever pitch during COVID when people were having to stay home, particularly if, you know, people of a certain age were considered more at risk. And so that, to your point about successes, I mean, that like is what motivates us every single day. And then, you know, to the parent point, what's really interesting, and this is where data can be, you know, a positive, is it gives you an objective view of how your kid is doing in the construct of that team or that league or whatever the sport is, and maybe makes for an easier set of conversations with coaches or, you know, administrators. I think it can help get the parents to a place where they're comfortable with what their kids are doing and also feel more connected, and maybe also potentially some of the angst that parents feel comes from not just motivation to kind of for their kid to excel, but maybe they aren't able to be there and they want their kid to do it, but now you have a way to be connected and a way to feed that urge of, you know, how are they doing through information. Now, of course, people take that too far. We see that all the time, but it is, you know, for the most part, it works really, really well. And so feel really good about it. I will, like a good interview question, I'm going to turn around the failure question and make it, for us, like more of an opportunity. We have, you know, it's like when you say you work too hard in an interview, right? We are very excited to more directly serve the athlete, the kid, because that just hasn't been, like Game Changer served coaches and parents and grandparents. And kids, you know, when like Game Changer started, kids playing like high school sports didn't have an iPhone when they were little because they were born in the, you know, early 2000s. So kids today, you know, including mine, have had phones, not their own, but they've had phones since they were very little, and tablets and all that. And so athletes are making more of the decisions. They're controlling their social media profiles. They're influencing much more so parent spending behavior. So we're personally, you know, Game Changer really, that's I wouldn't call it a failure because we haven't focused on it, but we're really excited to do more with the athletes. A lot of the, CJ and I had a lot of conversations over the years. We're really excited about that. It's not just the parent and the athlete is the reason we're all here.
So you are a game changer then.
Well, I mean, we're talking about it.
I thought you were punting the failure question just to hand it to me. You know, I think on our successes are very similar in that, you know, at the end of the day, when you hear from or you see somebody post on social media, we just had one last week where it was, you know, a parent posting a text thread with their kid with a screenshot of our app, and it's 7:45 in the morning, and the kid's in the garage taking swings in a little home run derby game that we have, and then texts his dad, says, hey, I got the first time I finally hit one far enough that it would have been a home run. And, you know, dad takes that, posts it on Facebook, and says, like, this is a great connection point with me and my kid as I'm on my way to work, and it's in the morning, and he does this every day kind of thing. So, you know, we take pride in that. We're trying to positively influence that kid-parent-coach experience. You know, I think opportunity, the failure, the growing piece of this from a company perspective is no different than probably how you think about this in all your organizations. We went through that continuum of, you kind of don't have any data to you have a lot of data and information, and you get behind that. And we're no different. A couple folks from my team here, like you all of a sudden you end up with a lot of information, but it's in a lot of disparate places, and you get behind that. You're behind, hey, how do I use this from a product development perspective? And so, inside our organization, we're investing tremendously right now in information operations and the ability to aggregate and have that information available to us throughout our entire organization in as real time a way as we possibly can. But it's taken us some time to understand through all of that information we have, what are the pieces that we really do want to focus on and want to have right in front of us, because you have this same thing you all deal with. You have all of this information, and it's user information, and it's all the data on all the swings they have, and how do we use that to inform product development, to financial data, to everything that you have. How can you get that again to the place? And it takes some time, but you do have to commit to a process around it. I think the one piece of advice I would give here is that I don't think it's just going to simply happen for everyone. There's going to be a level of, again, wherever you are on that spectrum, you've got to make a commitment, and that commitment starts with understanding goals, and it waterfalls its way down to am I going to put the time and the resources? And I'm not talking about the buy my tech, buy his tech, buy this system, buy as part of resources. But what we've seen a lot of is a lot of people put that stuff in their facility, they incorporate their program, but they haven't actually wired in the human capital and the resource piece to say how are we going to have a regular conversation around this? How are we going to do something with this to get it to be usable for us? And so I think if you're going to move down this road, don't do it on the backs of everything will just sort of organize itself and then it'll pop itself up and be there in a nice package for me. At some point, I think that's going to continue to happen, but I probably wouldn't sit back and wait for it and figure out what you think your sweet spot is.
I'm being hurried for to start the Q&A very soon, but Chris, Chris, CJ, I'm sorry, CJ, one of the CJs. So CJ, I wanted you to talk about your partnership with Major League. Does he have those couple minutes? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think as much as the same as for all of you probably, and we as a company have partners in the room here today. I think partnerships are a critical part of our collective universe here. So we're thrilled in our company to have partnered with Major League Baseball over the course of the last 6 months in really this kind of shared vision for how we heard Josh and Paul talk about this kind of generation, and you're going where the puck's going in terms of what they do and how they interact. They're digital natives, right? We know it. We coach them all. I have a 9-year-old and 12-year-old. That's where they are. That's what they expect. And so, we're excited in that particular partnership to partner with the league and figure out how do you interact and engage from a fun and instruction and engagement with the big league game in unique ways. That again, the accessibility and the ability to leverage a platform like ours, to leverage mobile applications to reach that generation in a different way, is really exciting. So it's certainly one that we're excited about what the next few years looks like.
I did have a question for Chris, and that is about your Team Curry.
Just what is Team Curry?
No, just tell us something about your
So Team Curry, is really just a small nominal piece to what PSB, Pro Skills Basketball, is. At the highest level of travel basketball, you have shoe circuits. You have the EYBL, which is Nike. You have Three Stripes, which is the Adidas Gauntlet, and then you have UAA. Steph, with our connection, our two co-founders played at Davidson just before Steph got there. We've been partnered with Under Armour for a while, and it was, hey, Steph, your motto is change the game for good. Our motto is to change the culture of youth basketball. How can those two live together? And we work together to do that. And so with that, we created Team Curry. So it's six teams, 15, 16, 17s on the boys and girls side. So about 30 kids on the boys side, 30 kids on the girls side, and really to give them a heightened level of experience from a travel basketball standpoint, to really help show them across the spectrum what it's going to be like to be a collegiate athlete, that is a job. mean, there are sacrifices involved to being a collegiate athlete, sacrifices now to then when you get into college. And so, it's the whole experience is really set about working with the MBPA. We were in Baltimore this year for a tournament, and they were getting educated in the just financial literacy, public speaking, NIL, how to leverage themselves, how to understand how to brand themselves and put themselves in a good position for 4 or 5, 7 years down the road from now. And so it's really cool. It's still in its infancy. We're only 3 years young. We just started the Team Curry Academy, which is to give back to a lot of kids in and around the Charlotte and North Carolina areas that want to be taught and challenged the way that we challenge high-level D1 athletes on the Curry teams, but to help kids who feel like they're underrated, because that was the big thing with Steph, is he was very much underrated, didn't get recruited by any big college in and around the North Carolina area, not even Virginia Tech, where his parents went. And so he felt slighted, and so he wants to provide that platform, and we are very much excited to be a part of that platform as well.
I guess now I've been told that I must move and throw questions to the floor. So anyone want to get us started?
Can any of you speak to using data in ways that you didn't expect? You were capturing something, there was data there, you didn't even know what it was. All of a sudden you saw something in it and made something out of it. Any thoughts or reflections about that?
I think for us, it happens all the time, because when we started, it was the ability to collect the data and we had the information, but we also were pretty transparent that it wasn't as if we were saying we know exactly what this means and exactly what to do with it. And so we've seen really interesting use cases over the years. Some of it being driven by users. And some of that at very high levels, some of it at low levels. We've seen major league customers and users of ours who find really interesting correlations across metrics that, if they didn't have the data and they weren't doing the deep dive, we wouldn't find that. And that sometimes turns into, new metrics, new features, new things that we look at from an analysis perspective. So I think that's a constant journey, but it only comes from the fact that you have the information to work with.
Yeah, I think for us, we stumbled onto just understanding a little more clear what our conversion rate is from hey, these kids came to tryouts, they were extended an invitation to a roster, and then they accepted a roster position. And I think the more we started looking at the number of kids that were coming to tryouts for certain grades, as we started to expand into different markets, it was, hey, how can we be better financial forecasters for our city directors, so they know that if their goal is 10 teams, well, they know that they have to get X amount of kids to come to tryouts based on the 90% acceptance conversion rate and so I think for us, we've started to really just look at numbers and start asking really fun questions like, hey, I wonder what that number can tell us if we dug a little deeper. And so now I know that if I have 10 kids for an 8th grade team come to tryouts, I'm not going to be able to field a full team, right? I need 15 kids coming for an 8th grade trial to be able to fill a 10-team roster. And so really understanding that helps our city directors to better forecast and just better speak to what they need to do or where they need to go.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. One of the things that we were talking about, report, insights, seeing dashboards, seeing the performance. I think a growing trend in data sometimes is, okay, I'm looking at the report as we've seen, and the KPI is down 20%. What do I do next? Surprising and growing trends is, how do we simply move data from systems to the tool that it's needed in? Surprising in terms of the growth and the velocity that's happening is how we can look at our data platform to not just provide the insight and the analysis, but also become that hub and spoke model of how we move data around our organization. I'm very bullish on it and very excited as we continue out our data platform expansion on how we can use it as a tool to help get data, not just in a report, but into the right tool that's being used daily.
Next question.
So we looked at retention and what is the reasons for athletes to not continue.
Could everyone hear or wish you to repeat?
Have you looked retention and what factors keep people in versus out?
Yeah, so for us, we have, right? So last year at this time we were 92%. This year we're 94%. And when we do our surveys to our parents, which we do large-scale surveys, we do quality checks. I travel around and go in the gyms and talk to parents. A large portion has to do with sometimes you're just going to lose parents, right? Sometimes your model, even though from the beginning it sounds great, but when you start to really put an emphasis on, hey, we're here for the long haul, like it's about the next 10 years, not the next 4 quarters of a game. Parents say that sounds great, but the minute their kids start struggling, it's like, I need to go find another program. So there's some of that that's just out of our control, right? But the things that are in our control that we found is how coaches communicate, how coaches coach and really get down and meet those kids where they are, and how they can handle a team of 10 kids where one kid is exceptional and then one kid has 2 left feet and no hands, right? And so our coaches have to be very dynamic in their ability to meet players' needs. And so those are 2 of the biggest pieces for our retention that we have in control: the quality of coaches, and then the soft skills from those coaches.
I'd like to address that question from a different perspective, and I agree with what you're saying, because being in a different business, we think about continuing participation of youth sports, of athletes in youth sports as they get older, and accessibility a lot, and it's a major industry issue. There's been a ton of press around it, as we know, and cost and all that, but I don't think anyone would debate that playing sports and being active is a positive thing, and we're definitely going in the opposite direction as a society where it costs a lot to have the incentive to keep playing, right? Public funding is being cut. More money is going to private, which, by the way, benefits everyone probably in this room in some form or another. But there have to be better solutions, because it's like a vicious cycle. Is public funding is cut, people move to private programs who can afford it, which means there's less people in the public programs, and that money then is cut again, and it goes on and on and on. As a country, as a world, all sorts of fiscal challenges in the sort of macro world. So I'm concerned about that. Unsurprisingly, I think technology, and there's plenty of technology that's for good, there's some that isn't, but the people who are up here and many in this room in this industry are really a force for good. Technology can lower costs, just start with that, right? It can increase accessibility. So we should all be thinking about how we can, create more efficiency. I'm not saying you have to, not be a business and make money, but there are ways to use technology to lower cost, increase accessibility, and just bring more people in and incentivize them, whether it's incentivizing the parent or incentivizing the kid to keep going and play through high school, play in college, etc.
Another question?
First, I just want to thank you guys for speaking to us today. But my question is, you're just talking about accessibility, but how do you guys use that as it relates to social impact?
So I think in this room, Bailey, who's also been time, raise your hand. I'm extremely proud of our company and our Fun Play program for social impact. I can acknowledge my privilege of growing up. I had accessibility to sports programs, to private practice facilities, to some of the top equipment, what I needed to become, successful in my youth sports journey. And it speaks volume to the apps in our approach of thinking through how we can make change with our technology, whether that in our Fun Play program, granting our technology for free to leverage underserved communities to have access to it. So the other thing that we focus in Fun Play is grants, right? Injecting capital to help. So if you see Bailey or Benita around, we'd love for you to have a conversation with them, but it is definitely a mark that makes me extremely proud to work at Big Apps to continue that as part of also how do we build the best software to allow our partners to continue to grow, whether it's in a for-profit or non-profit.
So I think that's an incredible question, and we were talking about this as it relates to women's basketball a couple weeks ago, because it's on A Sharp. in steady decline, and it's a very male-dominated sport. And so, you know, CJ talked about KPIs, and I think it's really important that as you are building just your organizational kind of vertical goals, right? Like what do you want to aim for? And one thing that we are very bullish on right now is how can we get more female leaders within our organization, to the point where it's like, hey, when we work with with the company that helps us kind of seek out new city directors, is, hey, we need strong women in that area. Because we need to give them a voice. We need to give them representation for our girls team, so we can build just that reinforce that culture. The other thing, we use an acronym. It's called FOCUS, and it's ingrained in everything that we do: fun, overcome, compete, unity, and self-improvement. And for me, I think sport is the great equalizer. Doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter what you believe in. Whatever sport you play has its own language. And if we can use the court, the field, the pitch, wherever we're playing that sport, to help people have a better awareness, a better understanding, appreciate inclusivity and diversity, I think we are all well on our way to making people better.
Two-part answer. Just first, in terms of work we do, right? Data is sort of central to our entire product. You collect the data and then share it. And we certainly, by no means, invented the sort of app freemium model, but obviously that's how we work. And so we put a lot of thought and effort and time into ensuring that, you know, our product, the free version of our product, which is the vast majority of our users, which is typically how those models work, is robust. So the biggest thing we've done the last couple of years is do video streaming, as many people know. It was a huge initiative, and put a big part of our company against it. It is really expensive to store video on the cloud, right? And live video streaming at Game Changer is free. And I still remember it was like in the middle of COVID, sitting there, and it was actually at home because we were all at home, saying, okay, we are going to make this free. We kind of bet the company on that model, and we figured out a model, an economic model for that to work. So people who can't be at the game for reasons that might have to do with equality and inclusivity and accessibility can see their kids play, and that's super important to us. The other thing, and this candidly, even before my time, but we've accelerated this. We haven't, you know, generally speaking, the Apple ecosystem is a more expensive ecosystem. It's a very broad generalization, but I think it is. And we, Game Changer several years ago, committed an equal set of resources to the Android ecosystem because it's a slightly cheaper ecosystem. It gives more accessibility. More people in general, whether it's the US or the world, use that ecosystem. There are companies out there who just, maybe they can't because of resources, but we didn't want to we wanted to give people complete accessibility across the board. Part two, what I want to say, and, you know, by the way, just kudos to League Apps for all that they do here. Our operating structure and sort of ownership structures, we are owned by a large company called Dick's Sporting Goods, the largest sports retailer in the country. We benefit from an incredible amount of effort that our parent company puts into saving youth sports, which is the mission of their foundation. It's a sports. It's called the Sports Matter Foundation. So we are able to leverage just some pretty intense efforts that they're doing. And like CJ said, super proud to work at Game Changer, and super proud that Game Changer is part of this larger organization that has made a massive non-economic commitment non-commercial commitment to saving youth sports. It's really great to be part of that. And we at Game Changer do everything we can to kind of support that, those efforts.
I agree with everything everybody has said here, and in our world, we believe. There's a floor there, right? So, but data has the ability. Apps have the ability through content, through experiences, through inability to get somewhere physically, to get instruction from that person that you're hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from, or hundreds of dollars that you don't have. There absolutely is a role for data and technology in that. Again, there's a floor if you don't have the device that operates that. We all lived what is possible when things are being done remotely and via Zoom, and I think that all of that helps expose that, with simple tools that are beginning to get that much more cost effective, it will further democratize the idea of, hey, I can learn and I can get better if I don't have physical access, if I don't have resource access. And I think most of that needs to be in conjunction and in partnership with all of you, right? I think one misnomer that starts to happen sometimes in my side of the tech world is like, hey, the tech's trying to replace the coaching. And it honestly could not be further from the truth. Like, we at our company, we will not try to teach you and tell you what to do. I cannot tell you how many times we've been asked, when's the app going to tell me what the perfect swing is? I mean, it's never going to, because that's not its purpose. The information is powerful. It's a tool that can be used, but it has to be in conjunction with those who then help create what to do off of that. Whether it's in a physical setting where you're standing next to a player, you're saying, hey, we're using this information. But I think to your question, more broadly, eventually, is how do you all, with us, figure out how you can deploy that in ways that are more economically favorable to a kid who doesn't have access to your program, who doesn't have geographic, access to anybody that's at a quality level that you are. So I think for us in our world, we see that as like our primary role in this idea of access.
I'm afraid I've been told this will be the last question, so put your hand up if you have one.
I think we see a lot of these technologies and data in larger sports like baseball and basketball. How do you see that going into other sports like lacrosse or other things that aren't as big picture?
We were talking about it our back, so
I'm happy to start. I mean, one of the things just as we're making a big push into, we started as a baseball, softball company, making a big push into all youth team sports. The thing we think about, this is just one piece of this whole of your question, which is an important and big question, is kind of the challenge of rolling products out is really going to depend on kind of like the fragmentation of the sport. And I think the challenge, I think your point, like some of the sports are maybe smaller, so maybe someone perceives like a different economic opportunity. But I think the challenge is on the people building the tech to build a product that has a high impact on the users, but also has like, an economic outcome, because business, like that's what you're trying to do. I am pretty convinced that smaller sports are very economically feasible, just again speaking for ourselves, but the challenge is on us, not on the sport. The challenge is on us to say, well, okay, if you have, you think there's 10 million fans in this sport and there's only like 1 million here, it's just, you have to build a product that satisfies what they want and still provides value that they're willing to part with a little bit of their hard-earned money. I mean, I take that as a challenge. We're really proud of the fact that we've solved a little bit of this sort of fragmentation element of youth sports. And again, I go back to technology, right? Everyone's got one or maybe more than one supercomputer in their pocket, which is your phone, and you can get to everyone that way. And it doesn't matter if it's millions and millions of fans. One of the cool things about professional sports is you can invest so much money in the infrastructure because you have so many fans connected to, so let's say, the New York Yankees or something, because you might attract 20 million people in that region. If you're at a lacrosse game in Baltimore, there might be 4 parents interested in that game. So you need to figure out a model that allows you to build infrastructure against it. You're not going to install, Yankee Stadium level cameras at that game because you're not going to get a return from those 4 parents. So you have your phone. Everything's going mobile. It's only going to be more in that direction. So that's kind of the bet we're making, and super excited, in particular, about lacrosse and other sports like that.
And I would add, just from a programming standpoint, right? Like you're looking like, okay, with my organization, how do I figure this out? Like I would ask you, like, what story do you want to tell about lacrosse? Right? Like what story about your program, about a player, about a coach, about just your program in general do you want to tell? Okay, well, what information currently sits in your program, that player, your coach, and then how can you collect it, and then how can you spit it out into data, and then how can you use that to then grow, right? And so, like, what's the story that you want to tell for lacrosse, and then how can you create data points? How can you take in information to then help tell that story, both anecdotal from the human side, and then from a data side, right? Like that's That's like a low-hanging fruit I can do as soon as I go back. What do I want to tell about the pros? What is it?
I'll chime in a little bit from the sports team itself. Coming from the pro league experience past my career, I think where a lot of the pro leagues focused over the last 8 years is creating that one-on-one fan experience, right? Like, yes, I love being in a bar watching, the Yankees I guess I'll contextualize to where we're at. Being able to share that moment, but at the same time, as we grow with these ultra pocket computers and the ability to connect to that fan in unique ways. I always like to say the majority of Los Angeles Laker fans will never attend a Los Angeles Lakers game this year. So there's other ways of connecting and building. So as we think through this, the leagues, the teams, being able to not just segment and group, but also to cut through and create these unique, hyper-personalized experiences is a trend that I really think data is going to drive us, whether it's on league apps, Game Changer, or any of these platforms represented up here. I think it's something that always has to be at the forefront of our thinking as we head into the future of data and how it's going to impact sports and esports.
I'll keep mine for 30 seconds and eat. I think I agree with what Samir said, although I do think there's one sort of charge, if you will, to like the sports and the industry in this. And as everything has skewed towards more sports-specific things on the private side, and in some respects even on the public side of things, you should push to get out of that sport and cross-pollinate over, right? So a lot of, I think, what you end up seeing in your world, and we're baseball and softball specific, so I don't have as much experience with it. A lot of that comes from multi-sport families who are on Game Changer for their baseball team, and then soccer rolls around, and whether it's the coach or I'm assuming, and we talked about this a little bit. But as you look at like how you would want technology to be utilized in lacrosse, for example, get out of lacrosse and go. It happens in baseball all the time. So at the highest level of baseball, like hitting instructors in baseball at the major league level, all go train and learn from golf and the golf swing and all the technology that gets utilized in golf. And so I would encourage the cross-pollination, if nothing else, just to understand what's happening in other sports. Might not be applicable, but it might be. And in doing that, those that are building the technology and the tools start to see and hear and understand that, and you start helping push us collectively in the directions of, hey, here's an industry now that's saying, based on what we see around us, this is what we think would be great for lacrosse, and we've learned it. And to be honest, like you will probably get to avoid some of the speed bumps that early adopting sports and technology have sort of taken brunt of and learned from over the last 5 years, and you get to bypass them.
Like all good things have to come to an end, this panel as well. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining.